It's strange how life can feel full and empty at the same time. For Ethan Parker, that feeling had become a quiet companion. Every morning he followed the same routine: coffee in a chipped mug, a quick glance at the news he didn't care much about, and then the long drive to work through the same gray streets of the small coastal town where he'd grown up. He wasn't unhappy. Not exactly. He had a good job, a small but cozy apartment, and a circle of friends he caught up with once in a while. But inside him lived a kind of stillness, as if something was missing and he didn't know what it was. Sometimes, in the evenings, Ethan would find himself staring out his window, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the rain-soaked glass. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He wasn't even sure what he was waiting for. It was more like a longing, quiet ache that had no name. He often thought about how things had changed over the years. People grew distant. Friendships faded. The world kept moving whether he was ready or not. Yet among all the faces that had drifted away, one connection still lingered: Michael Turner, his childhood best friend. Michael was the kind of person who filled any space with laughter. Where Ethan was calm and thoughtful, Michael was spontaneous and bold. They had been inseparable since grade school, sharing everything from comic books to broken hearts. But after college, life took them in different directions. Michael moved to another city for work. Ethan stayed behind, settling into a quiet rhythm that became both comfort and cage. They still spoke occasionally: birthdays, holidays, random calls that began with, "Hey man, remember when?" But recently, Michael had called sounding more serious. His voice carried that hint of distance, like someone standing at the edge of a memory. "You should come by sometime," he had said. "Mom's been asking about you. She still makes your favorite lemon cake, you know?" Ethan had laughed it off, promising to visit soon. But soon never came, until one cold, gray Saturday afternoon, when the sound of rain against the window stirred something inside him, a kind of restlessness he couldn't ignore. He grabbed his coat, keys, and the half-forgotten feeling that maybe, just maybe, visiting the Turner's house might bring back a little of what he'd lost. The drive was long and quiet. The road twisted through the hills, lined with trees dressed in the soft gold of early autumn. Every turn carried echoes of old laughter, old stories. He could still remember the way he and Michael used to race bikes down this same road, daring each other to go faster, never thinking about what waited beyond the next curve. When he finally turned into the familiar neighborhood, a wave of nostalgia hit him. The houses looked smaller than he remembered, as if time had gently folded the world into softer edges. And there, at the end of the street, stood the Turner house white picket fence, ivy climbing up the porch, and the same small lamp glowing by the window. He parked outside and sat for a moment, watching the rain drizzle across the windshield. He wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe a quick visit, a few laughs with Michael, and that would be it. But deep down, something told him this visit might mean more than that. As he stepped out of the car, the air felt heavy with the smell of wet leaves and pine. The sound of rain softened everything, making the world seem slower, quieter, almost sacred. He walked up the path, heart beating a little faster than he wanted to admit, and knocked gently on the door. It opened after a few moments, not to Michael, but to his mother, Claire Turner. "Ethan," she exclaimed softly, her eyes lighting up with genuine warmth. "Oh my goodness, it's been years." He smiled a little shyly. "Hi, Mrs. Turner. I hope it's not a bad time. Michael told me to drop by sometime, and I thought, well, today felt like the right day." Her expression softened into something between surprise and fondness. "It's never a bad time, dear. Come in, come in. You're soaked." Ethan stepped inside, instantly wrapped in the familiar scent of home freshly baked bread. Rain on wood floors, and the faint trace of lemon from the candle burning on the counter. Everything looked just as it had years ago. The same photos lined the hallway. Michael and Ethan at age 10, covered in mud. The Turners at Christmas. Claire smiling in the garden with her late husband. "Michael's actually out running a few errands," Claire said, taking his coat. "But I'm so glad you came. It's been far too long." Ethan nodded, glancing around. "Yeah, it has. There was a warmth about Claire that never changed. She had a way of speaking that made you feel seen, even in silence. Her kindness filled the air like sunlight breaking through clouds as she poured him a cup of tea. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a quiet realization that he'd missed more than just his best friend. He'd missed the feeling of belonging, of being remembered, of being part of something simple and good. They talked for a while about small things, work, the weather, Michael's new job, but beneath every word was a feeling of connection that neither of them named. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He didn't know it yet. But this ordinary, rainy afternoon was the beginning of a story that would stay with him forever. The rain hadn't stopped. It whispered softly against the windows, filling the quiet spaces between their words. Inside the Turner house, time felt slower, like the world outside had paused. Just long enough for two people to rediscover something that had been waiting for years. Ethan sat at the wooden kitchen table, the same one where he and Michael had eaten countless after-school snacks, where they'd done homework and shared secrets that once felt like the center of the universe. Claire moved around the kitchen with practiced grace, setting down a small plate of lemon cake and 2 cups of steaming tea. "You still remember?" Ethan said with a soft smile. "This was always my favorite." Claire laughed gently, sitting across from him. "Of course I remember. You used to eat half the cake before dinner and then swear it wasn't you." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Michael always blamed me. I guess I deserved it." They both laughed. But as the sound faded, something else lingered, a quiet warmth, the kind that comes from shared history. For a moment, the years between them didn't feel so heavy. Claire took a sip of her tea, her eyes drifting toward the rain outside. "You boys were always together. Sometimes I thought of you as my second son." Her words made Ethan smile, though it carried a touch of sadness. "It's been a long time since I've felt that close to anyone. Life got busy, I guess." Claire nodded knowingly. "It always does. People grow up, find new cities, new worries. But the heart doesn't always keep up, does it?" Her tone wasn't sad, it was reflective, thoughtful. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. She hadn't changed much. The same calm voice, the same kindness in her eyes. But there was something else now, something quieter, almost like a gentle ache beneath her smile. He remembered when he and Michael were teenagers, how Claire would sit with them during summer evenings, telling stories about her own youth, about dreams she once chased and the choices that shaped her. Back then, Ethan hadn't understood the weight behind her words. Now, as an adult, he did. "You always had a way of making people feel safe," Ethan said softly. "Even when I messed up, you never made me feel small." Claire smiled, touched by his sincerity. "You were a good boy, Ethan, just a little lost sometimes." "We all are, at that age." He nodded, feeling that familiar warmth return. "Sometimes I think I still am." Her expression softened. "Maybe being lost isn't always bad. It means you're still searching for something that matters." Those words stayed with him. Searching for something that matters. That was exactly how he felt, though he'd never said it out loud before. They talked for a while longer about Michael's move to the city, about Ethan's quiet job designing websites, about how fast everything seemed to move now. The conversation flowed easily, full of small smiles and thoughtful pauses. Every so often, Claire would glance at the old photo frames on the wall. Each one held a moment frozen in time. Michael in his graduation cap, the family at the lake. Ethan and Michael grinning with scraped knees and grass-stained shirts. "Those were good days," Claire murmured. "Back when the biggest problem was keeping you two from climbing the old oak tree." Ethan laughed. "You always yelled at us for that, and you never listened," she replied, smiling. "But I suppose that's what boys do, chase things just out of reach." Her words had a weight that made Ethan pause. He realized she wasn't just talking about the tree. She was talking about life, about dreams, youth, and the things we reach for, even when we know they're slipping away. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Do you ever miss it? The noise, the chaos, all of it." Claire looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of her teacup. "Every day," she said softly. "This house used to feel alive. Now it's just quiet. I keep expecting to hear laughter from the hallway or someone calling my name." Ethan's heart ached at the sound of her voice. He understood that kind of silence, the one that sits heavy in an empty room, He said gently, "You built something really special here. That doesn't fade even when people move away." Claire looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. There was gratitude there, and something deeper and understanding that didn't need words. "Thank you, Q," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." The clock on the wall ticked softly. The storm outside was starting to ease, leaving the world washed in. Evening settled softly over the town, brushing the sky with shades of lavender and fading gold. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the streets glistening under the pale light of street lamps. Inside the Turner home, everything felt quiet, too quiet. In that tender way where silence doesn't feel empty but full of unspoken meaning. Ethan sat back in his chair, his hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. Across the table, Claire smiled faintly as she folded a napkin, though her eyes seemed to be somewhere far away. "It feels strange," she said after a pause, "having someone else here again. For a while, I thought I'd forgotten what that felt like." Ethan nodded. "I get that. My apartment feels the same way. It's funny how quiet can start to feel like company after a while." Claire looked at him thoughtfully. "You sound lonely." He gave a small, honest smile. "Maybe I am. But I think everyone gets lonely sometimes. We just get better at hiding it." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked over to the old record player by the shelf and lifted the lid. "Do you remember this?" she asked. Ethan stood and moved closer. The record player was old, its wooden frame slightly worn, the brass knobs dulled by years. "You used to play music every Sunday morning," he said, smiling at the memory. "Michael and I would complain about it, but we secretly loved it." Claire laughed softly. "That was my ritual. Music, coffee, and sunlight. I always believed a song could change the mood of a day." She placed a record on the turntable and gently lowered the needle. A soft crackle filled the air before a gentle piano melody began to play a slow, tender tune that filled the room like a memory come alive. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The music carried them both somewhere else, back to summers long gone, to the smell of fresh grass and the sound of laughter echoing down the hallways. "It's strange," Ethan said finally. "I feel like I never really left this place. Every sound, every smell, it's all still here." Claire smiled wistfully. "That's what happens when a place holds good memories. It waits for you." The room fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that speaks louder than words. Ethan felt something stir inside him, an ache, but not a painful one. More like the feeling of remembering something precious you didn't realize you'd forgotten. And then, as if fate wanted to test that fragile piece, the power flickered. The lights dimmed once, twice, and then went out completely. The house was suddenly dark except for the faint glow of the record player's dial. The piano kept playing softly, the notes echoing through the quiet. Claire gave a small gasp, then laughed under her breath. "Well, that's new. The storm must have hit the lines again." Ethan smiled, feeling oddly calm. "It's okay. I think I saw some candles in the hallway." He found a few on a shelf and brought them back to the kitchen. Claire lit them one by one, their warm light dancing across the walls. The whole room changed. The shadows softened and everything felt gentler, more intimate, though not in a romantic sense. It was the intimacy of trust, of shared quiet moments that feel real. Claire looked around and sighed. "It's beautiful like this, isn't it? Almost feels like time stopped." Ethan nodded. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." For a moment, their eyes met, and both smiled, just a small, knowing smile that carried gratitude more than anything else. Then Claire spoke softly, almost to herself. When you grow older, you start to realize how rare these moments are. The ones where you're not rushing, not pretending, just being." Ethan listened quietly. Her words sank deep, stirring something that had been sleeping in him for a long time, the desire to feel connected. To be seen, to be understood without needing to explain. He finally said, "You've always had a way with words. I think that's what I missed most about this house. It wasn't just Michael it. Was the feeling that someone here always understood." Claire looked down at her hands, then back at him. "You were always easy to understand, Ethan. You felt deeply even when you didn't say much." A faint silence followed, full of emotion but still safe and respectful. The kind of silence that happens when two people are remembering who they aren't who they used to be, outside. The wind brushed softly against the windows. The candles flickered, their light painting soft golden halos around the room. Then, almost unexpectedly, a framed photo fell from the mantel and landed face down on the floor. Startled, Ethan knelt to pick it up. It was a picture of Claire, her husband, and a young Michael. But what caught Ethan's eye was a smaller frame hidden behind it one he hadn't noticed before. It was a photo of him and Michael at age 15, standing in front of the lake, laughing with carefree joy. Claire must have kept it there all these years. He looked up, touched. "You kept this?" Claire smiled gently. "Of course. You were part of this family, Ethan. You always will be." Her words carried a simple truth, but for Ethan, they meant everything. For years he had felt adrift, as if life had quietly moved on without him. And now, standing there in the flickering candlelight, he felt something steady inside him, again a sense of belonging, fragile but real. "Thank you," he said softly, "for remembering me." She shook her head, her eyes warm. Some people are impossible to forget. The record came to an end, the last note fading into the dim air. Neither of them moved to turn it off. The silence that followed wasn't awkward debt, was peaceful, full of meaning that words couldn't touch. Ethan looked around, realizing how strange and perfect this evening had been. A random visit, a storm, a blackout tan, yet it had brought him closer to something he hadn't felt in years. Connection, warmth, and the quiet certainty that some moments happen for a reason. As the power slowly returned, and the lights flickered back to life, Claire gave a small smile. "Looks like fate wanted us to have a little pause." Ethan smiled back. Maybe fate knew we needed one. Outside, the night had cleared, revealing a calm sky sprinkled with stars. Inside, two souls lonely in different ways had found comfort in the simple grace of being seen. Neither said it out loud. But both knew something had shifted. Something gentle, real, and unforgettable had begun. His room had settled into a calm, almost sacred quiet. Outside, the night was still, with only the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Ethan sat on the worn wooden chair, staring into the soft glow of the lamp. Claire moved around the kitchen, wiping a few crumbs from the counter. Her movements familiar yet almost ceremonial, like she was trying to preserve a sense of normalcy. Neither spoke for a moment. And yet in that silence 100 unspoken words lingered between them. Ethan took a deep breath, realizing that tonight was different from any visit he had made before. Something had shifted, small, subtle, but undeniable. The warmth of the room, the faint scent of lemon and old books. The quiet way Claire's eyes lingered on memories he thought were long forgotten. It all made him feel something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He wanted to say something. Anything but the words felt heavy. How could he explain that he had spent countless evenings thinking about this house? About Michael's laughter? About Claire's quiet presence that always seemed to understand him more than anyone else? Claire, too, seemed caught in a quiet reflection. She paused at the sink, her hands resting on the porcelain as her gaze drifted to the window. "You know," she said softly, "it's strange how life moves forward and yet leaves these little pockets of the past behind. Little reminders of what once mattered." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "I felt that too," he admitted. "Like there's a part of me that never really left this place. Or maybe never wanted to." Claire turned to him then, her eyes meeting his with something unspoken. A mixture of curiosity, warmth, and caution. She hesitated before speaking again. Sometimes I wonder if we notice the important things too late. The people, the moments, the connections we should have held on to longer. Ethan nodded slowly. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the quiet weight of something he had been avoiding for years. He realized he had been running from the thought of being this close to Claire again, not because of anything inappropriate, but because the feelings that came with it were unfamiliar, deep, and entirely human. "I've missed this," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Not just Michael or even the house, but this, being able to just be here." Claire's lips curved into a small, tender smile. She didn't reach for his hand. She didn't move closer. But the warmth in her gaze said more than words ever could. "Ethan," she said quietly, "sometimes the heart remembers things we don't even know it's holding on to." They both fell silent, and the room seemed to breathe with them. Ethan's mind raced, thinking about how long it had been since he had felt this sense of closeness with another person, someone who could see him without pretense, without expectation. And yet, even with the clarity, he hesitated. There was fear, too. Fear of what might happen if these feelings were acknowledged. The boundaries they had always respected were shifted. Claire, on her part, felt the same tug of emotion. She had raised Michael and watched him grow alongside Ethan, always aware of how important he had been to the family. And now, with Ethan sitting here, so much older, so much changed. She realized there was a quiet longing she had never let herself admit. But she also knew that expressing Van in the gentlest way could alter everything they had cherished. They spoke in small fragments, bits of conversation that never fully revealed the depth of what they were feeling. The night had deepened, leaving the world outside cloaked in a soft, quiet darkness. Inside the Turner house, the glow from the living room lamp cast gentle shadows across the walls, illuminating the familiar photos and the small details that made the space feel like a sanctuary. Ethan sat on the sofa, hands wrapped around his mug, still feeling the warmth from Claire's tea earlier. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was a companion, space where thoughts could linger without demand or judgment. Claire moved to the window, her fingers tracing the cool glass. The moonlight filtered through, silver and soft, and illuminated her thoughtful face. For a long moment, Ethan simply watched her, noticing the way the light seemed to touch everything about her, that he had always admired her calmness, her quiet strength, and the warmth that had always drawn people in. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low, careful. "Claire, I don't know how to say this, and I might get it wrong, but I've missed more than just this house, or even Michael. I've missed you too. Your kindness, your patience, the way you make people feel like they belong." Claire turned toward him, eyes wide but gentle, caught off guard by this sudden honesty. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came immediately. Instead, she moved closer and sat across from him, resting her hands lightly on her knees. "Ethan," she said softly, "you have no idea how long I've waited to hear that kind of thing. To feel it, even. You've always been special to this family and to me. I think I've felt it for years, but I never wanted to complicate your life or Michael's." The air between them seemed to thrum with unspoken emotion. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and fear, as if finally saying what he felt had opened a door that had been locked for far too long. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," he admitted, "because I didn't want to overstep. But I can't ignore it anymore. I've always cared, in a way that's hard to explain. It's not the same as what I feel for Michael, of course. He's my best friend. But you've always mattered to me, more than I realized." Claire's eyes softened, her lips curving into a small, tender smile. "Ethan, that's exactly how I feel. But I've held it back for so long. I didn't know if you'd see me as more than Michael's mom. And I didn't want to risk losing what we already had, the trust, the connection. It's been easier to stay silent." The honesty between them filled the room like a quiet, steady flame. Neither was shouting. Neither was rushing. They were simply being present, letting the truth finally breathe after years of quiet restraint. Ethan reached out, Kay almost instinctively, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. It was a small, careful gesture full of affection and respect. Claire didn't pull away. Instead, she let her hand hover near his, as if acknowledging the moment without words. "You're right," Ethan said softly. "We've always been careful. But maybe we don't need to be anymore? Maybe it's time to just say what we feel, even if it's messy or uncertain." Claire nodded slowly. "It is messy. Life always is. But some things are worth the mess. The love, the care, the honesty. It's worth it." Outside, a gentle wind stirred the branches of the trees. A few leaves drifted past the window, caught in the moonlight. Ethan felt like the world had paused again, giving them a private space to speak the words they had both held inside. "I've imagined this moment," he admitted quietly. "Not like this exactly, but moments where I could tell you how much I appreciate you, how much you've shaped my life, even when I didn't realize it." Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "And I've imagined it too. So many times, wondering if you ever noticed. If you've ever felt the same." Ethan smiled, a mixture of relief and emotion washing over him. "I do. I always have." For the first time in years, there was no hesitation between them. The unspoken feelings that had lingered in every memory, every visit, every shared laugh or quiet moment were finally out in the open. It wasn't dramatic in the way a storybook might describe, was real, tender and deliberate. Claire reached out, lightly placing her hand over his, and the warmth of the gesture carried everything they couldn't say in words. Ethan held it gently, careful not to rush the moment, but savoring it fully. "This feels right," Claire said, her voice steady but emotional. "I don't know what comes next, but I know this moment is real. And that's what matters." Ethan nodded. "I don't know what comes next either. But I know I want to be here. With you, honest, open, and just like this." The wind outside slowed, and the night seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the living room was quiet again. But now it was a quiet filled with possibility, understanding, and the start of something new. Neither needed to rush. There was no need for declarations of love that would demand answers. Tonight, the turning point wasn't about grand gestures. It was about honesty, about opening their hearts and acknowledging the feelings they had carried in silence for so long. Morning light slipped softly through the Turner house windows, casting a gentle glow on the wooden floors and the familiar photographs lining the walls. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside washed clean, the air crisp and fresh. Inside, Ethan and Claire moved with a quiet ease, the unspoken truths of the night before still humming softly between them. Ethan stood by the window, watching the sunlight touch the garden, feeling an unusual calm. He glanced back at Claire, who was humming softly while arranging a small vase of flowers on the table. It was a simple morning, ordinary in every way, and yet it felt extraordinary. "You look peaceful," Ethan said, his voice gentle. Claire turned toward him, her smile soft and warm. "I do. I think last night helped me remember what really matters. Connection, kindness, honesty, moments like these." Ethan nodded, feeling the same quiet truth settling in his chest. For years, he had chased the feeling of belonging in his own way, unaware that it had been right here all along, wrapped in laughter, memory, and quiet understanding. They sat together at the table, tea steaming in their mugs, the sunlight catching in Claire's hair. Neither rushed to speak, nor did they need to. The comfort between them had grown naturally, a bond strengthened by shared history, honesty, and a deep understanding that words alone could not capture. "You know," Claire said softly, "I was worried for a while that we had missed our chance to really connect. That time had created a distance we couldn't cross." Ethan shook his head, smiling. "I think it brought us here instead, right to this moment. Maybe some things are worth waiting for." She smiled back, and for the first time, both of them allowed themselves to truly feel the weight of the past, the joy of the present, and the quiet hope of the future. There was no rush, no pressure, just the understanding that life had given them a second chance at something rare and meaningful. Michael returned home later that morning, cheerful as ever, completely unaware of the subtle shift that had taken place. He laughed at the sight of Ethan and his mother sitting together with tea as if nothing had changed. "Looks like you two are having a proper reunion," he exclaimed, plopping his bag down. Claire laughed softly. "We are," she said, her eyes twinkling. Ethan caught her glance and smiled, a small, knowing smile. It carried all the warmth of last night's confessions, the acknowledgement of feelings that had remained unspoken for years, now finally allowed to exist. After Michael left to unpack, Ethan and Claire remained in the living room. The afternoon stretched lazily before them, quiet and calm. They talked about small things, upcoming events in the town. A new book Ethan had discovered, Claire's plans for the garden. Each word was light, yet each carried a subtle depth. A recognition that their connection had changed the rhythm of their lives. "You know," Ethan said after a moment, "I've spent so many years feeling like I was drifting, like something was missing. I didn't realize it was moments like this I was searching for." Claire's eyes softened. "And now you have them. Sometimes life gives us what we need, even if it comes later than we expected." For a while, they sat together in comfortable silence, simply sharing the quiet presence of each other. There was no rush for declarations or labels, no need for drama. What mattered was the truth they had spoken, the bond they had acknowledged, and the promise of being present in each other's lives in a way that was real, meaningful, and lasting. As the sun climbed higher, they stepped outside into the garden, the morning air filled with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. Ethan breathed it in, feeling lighter, freer, and somehow more at home than he had in years. Claire placed her hand gently on his arm. "This is how it should feel," she said. "Not complicated, not hurried, just steady, honest, alive." Ethan nodded. "I think I understand now. It's not about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about being here, together, and letting things grow naturally." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunlight, and for the first time, Ethan felt a quiet certainty. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning. A slow, deliberate, and deeply human beginning built on trust, care, and shared history. They spent the rest of the morning tending to the small garden, laughing softly at memories and discovering new joys in ordinary things. The past had shaped them, the present had reunited them, and the future felt open, full of hope, possibility, and the quiet promise of more moments like these. Ethan eventually stood at the edge of the garden path, glancing back at Claire. "I'll come by again soon," he said, voice gentle but firm.